this isn't any ordinary gamer.
I had the reputation at the time of this mad genius.
He created a bunch of companies focusing on robots,
automobile navigation,
microwave components,
and a bunch of others.
He is the man who launched the video game revolution.
But there's one more creation you may not know about. A place where a kid can be a kid.
Let's welcome creative genius Nolan Bushnell.
Nolan Bushnell.
In many ways, you can trace the history of video games all the way back to this man, Nolan Bushnell. In 1972, Nolan co-founded one of the first video game companies. They called it Atari. Their first hit is a table tennis game called Pong. It sets record sales and permanently changed the arcade world. Even though arcades were hitting critical mass, families were still hesitant to accept them into their lives. To change hearts and minds, Nolan knew that arcades needed a new and friendly face. This is the story of how he introduced the world to a new mascot of gaming, Chuck E. Cheese. In the 1970s and 80s, this is what a video game looked like. Yeah, it doesn't look like much, but back then, games like these turned Atari into a multi-billion-dollar company.
At Atari, we had explosive growth. We were just printing money because we were lean and mean and had good games.
But having good games wasn't enough. The market was saturated, and Atari needed to break into a new demographic.
I wanted to create a chain of big arcades focusing on kids.
That even passed laws restricting the use of the games.
But there were certain cities that didn't want to have arcades because teenagers came and they'd cause trouble. So I felt that disguising it as a restaurant was a good business strategy. Chuck E. Cheese was an arcade masquerading as a restaurant.
Though Nolan had the idea, he needed someone to turn it into a reality. So he tapped one of the brightest business minds within Atari. A man as ambitious as he was. A man as crazy as he was.
Come on, baby.
Meet the first president of Chuck E. Cheese, Gene Landrum.
I have been pretty competitive my whole life. I was 20 years old. I was Mr. Fort Lauderdale. I won 100 tennis tournaments. So I did business kind of the same way. I happen to be an aggressive guy and go get it done and win the game. When Nolan hired me to do this, I actually looked at myself and said, "What do you know about food, Gene?" "Nothing."
But that was a risk Nolan wanted to take. He knew that creating something unorthodox required visionaries, not experts set in their ways.
Experts don't understand the future. Too many times you have to unteach experts. So when it came to spinning up the Chuck E. Cheese project, I thought Gene would be the perfect guy.
So where did Gene start? Well, with food.
Pizza makes sense because families love pizza. And guess what? It takes 20 minutes to make a pizza. So while they're waiting, the kids are playing the games, and I had Chuck actually deliver the pizza. And I went down south and found a guy who did costumes for Disney. I said, "Look, I don't want a mouse. Disney's got Mickey. And I don't want a rat, it's too hardcore. I want a soft rat." And he did it.
And after only 3 months of work, Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater opened its doors for the first time on May 17th, 1977.
Everybody is willing to say that talking robots in a pizza parlor with a lot of games was a really stupid idea. And in fact, the day we opened, I knew we'd screwed up. The place wasn't big enough.
My joint was filled. There wasn't a seat. And once I learned how to do it, I opened a store a week. 50 stores I opened in 1 year.
I had no fear. I knew that it was going to do well.
Chuck E. Cheese's initial stores were a hit. But at the parent company Atari, things were going a little differently.
Warner bought Atari, and all of a sudden you had a whole bunch of New York suits pruning my pet projects. I was really upset about that, and it dawned on me that I was having a lot more fun working on Chuck E. Cheese than on Atari.
And so Nolan eventually left Atari. Over time, the company struggled and faded away as the spotlight turned to new gaming giants like Nintendo. But while kids today may not know the name Atari, Chuck E. Cheese is still a childhood hotspot. After 40 years, the bucktooth pizza-serving stuffed rat still stands as a testament to Nolan's innovation in the video game industry.
It was a whirlwind. It was more successful than I thought it would ever be. But Chuck E. Cheese, it's a viable concept. It makes sense. It still makes sense.
Chuck E. Cheese's is better than ever. Thank you, thank you.
There's a vanishingly small number of places where parents and children can have a fun night out. And that was one of the goals. You know, I feel good about that. I saw it, I did it, I was at the beginning. Enough.